All right, I'm talking with Samir Balwani, who's the founder and owner and CEO of QRY, which is well, you explain, Samir.
Yes, Query is a media buying agency that specializes in helping consumer brands really understand how brand awareness and performance marketing work together, and being able to use that to scale their brands.
And this is absolutely amazing because you and I were sitting together what feels like a week ago, but it was a year ago. We were sitting together at an event talking about doing a podcast together, and you were really excited about it. Now, here, flash forward a year later, you've gotten how much? About $1 million in revenue
Yeah, we'll close about $1 million in revenue from our podcast.
from a year of doing the podcast, and you've done about well, how many was it? 40 interviews, 30 something interviews?
About 35 interviews. Yeah, 36 interviews.
And you were just explaining the process. You really have a great system in place for, you don't have to go through the whole details, but reaching out to people who are prospects, politely inviting them to come do a pre-call with you. Give me an overview of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we do is we'll try and identify brands that we are really excited about. The beauty of it is the brands that I want to talk to tend to also be the brands that we want to work with, right? And so having them come on the podcast is a really great opportunity for me to speak to them. We'll bring them on the podcast, have that conversation. It's a lot of fun. I usually learn a lot about them. They learn a lot about us. Uh, and as a thank you for coming onto the podcast, we'll do an engagement with them as just recognizing that they've given us an hour of their time, so it's worth giving something back. And that usually allows us to have a real meaningful conversation. But then, when the time is right, they're excited to try and work with us.
And I like that because that's something that you normally charge people for. So it has value. You deliver value to them. But as a thank you to the guests for being a guest on the show, you put reminders in each of your emails telling them about this and offering for them to book it, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We don't want people to miss out on it, but we also don't want to be so pushy because some people just don't want it, and that's
Sure.
fine.
Yeah.
Like when the time arises, when they're ready for it, when they need it. And so if you, John, if you were to ask me why the podcast has been really successful, I'd say one, I love doing it, right? Like even if I didn't close a single dollar off of it, I would still continue doing it because it's just fun. And the second one is I really like being able to help people. And so being able to be just genuine and truly like helping people solve their problems lets them realize that our entire agency is dedicated to doing that for our clients.
And ultimately, that's what it's about, right? It's like getting the opportunity to talk to the right person. And if you have some advice or tip or something, weaving that into the conversation or sharing maybe another client that you've worked with and, helping them with that as well.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like there are natural networkers, like natural connectors. It's the person who I'm sure we've all run into this. You're having a conversation with them, but they've already figured out, oh, I know exactly who this person needs to talk to, and you get that email right after. It's those kinds of people, that kind of thinking that ends up being really great on the podcast, right? Being able to talk to somebody and them being able to say, oh yeah, you know who'd be great for your podcast? You should talk to this person. And then me doing the same thing, right? Hey, you said this on the podcast was a major problem of yours. And, I don't, my agency doesn't do it, but I know who can help you. Let me connect you with them. And, just, being in service of others helps.
And then the other thing that you're doing really well is having a process for following up afterwards, after they've been a guest on the show. So sending additional follow up messages to them just so you're top of mind. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's funny because the way you speak to it is uh, you make it sound much more intentional than it actually is. And so it is semi-intentional, I think is the best way to put it. Going back to I just like to help people. If I see something, I'll keep track of, all of our podcast guests and make sure that I keep in touch with them. Because again, it all starts from these are people I wanted to talk to. These are brands I was excited about anyway. And so if I see something, I talk to a beauty brand A and I see one of our clients that's a beauty brand we just did a research report for, and it's something that we're sharing with all of our beauty brands. I might share it with somebody that I spoke to on the podcast. We just did, we're talking right now. It's October, and Q4 for a lot of our clients is huge. And my team put together a holiday POV, like how you should manage holiday strategy, especially in an election year. And so I'll share that with our podcast guests as a hey, here's what we're thinking about. I hope you guys are thinking about too. And if you want to have a conversation about it, by all means, like we're happy to talk to you about it. So again, just being helpful wherever we can.
And what I love too is that you put this all into a pipeline, so it's visual. And once you get to the point where you've done 50 episodes, 100 episodes, 200 episodes, 300 episodes, then it can get really unwieldy if you don't have that kind of pipeline in place. If you don't have that process of going back and looking back at the past guests on the podcast. And yeah, I admit it, it's happened to me where I've forgotten about someone that I interviewed 5 years ago. But the beauty is that they don't forget about you if you keep on putting out the content, because they're subscribed to you on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube. They may be on your email newsletter, so you may still be top of mind with them, even if you aren't sending like an individual one-on-one message to them, which is good as well. So
Yeah, yeah. I think the key for this, for it to be successful, is just being super organized. If you're not really organized, uh, it'll fall through the cracks and then you won't do it. The other thing too is if you go at it with the perspective of I'm going to make money on it, it will come off like that, and that's a huge turnoff. And you will ultimately not be successful. If you go at it with the perspective of I'm excited about doing this and I like these conversations and I'm having fun, then that's how it comes off, and that's a lot more fun. I'd say the two things is I look back on it is one, simplify it as much as you can. I think people overcomplicate it. So if you listen to my podcast, I actually ask the same 7 questions to every podcast guest. It is the same 7 questions. Because they are broad enough and I allow the guests to take it where they want to. But those are the 7 things I want to make sure I cover off on in every episode. And so the amount of prep work that I have to do for each episode is pretty minimal outside of a pre-call to just make sure that we have some chemistry, that we can actually have a conversation, right?
yeah,
And the second piece of it is on the sales side, it takes a lot longer than you think it will. If you think you're going to do a podcast and get a client, that is unrealistic. It takes months to build those relationships, and the client, then the person needs to be at that stage where they're ready to want to work with you. The goal of the podcast is it's just an audition. Are you the right? Are you thinking about it in the same way the prospect is thinking about it? Can you see yourselves working together? And if you can, then it's just a matter of time before it happens.
yeah, that's great. There's been so much gold here. But any final tips you want to give for anyone who's maybe thinking about doing a podcast but hasn't started?
Oh, just get started. It's John, you've been through when we first started, it was, hey, we're going to do one every other week. And man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. And then it quickly turned into, oh man, I've got one every week. What do we do? And I'm booked through the end of the year and it's only April. Once you've got a good system in place, it goes fast. And honestly, it's a lot of fun. And so that would be my final thought.
Yeah, that's great. And where can people go to learn more about you?
Check me out on LinkedIn and check us out at weareqry.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Samir.